Are these characters from The Wizard of Oz Democrat or MAGA? I am not including any Wicked storylines in here, so for the sake of the video, we're gonna pretend like Wicked doesn't exist. Doesn't have a good grasp on the political climate because she's so young and sheltered. But she would absolutely be for the minorities, and once she learns more, she would vote Democrat. Moderate, the type who would say both sides are messed up and that Trump has some good ideas. I mean, he didn't have a brain. Dorothy said she'd miss him most of all, but in 5 years, she's gonna be like, ugh, what was I thinking? Democrat, he went through something pretty awful being trapped for all that time without a heart. He wants to make sure others don't go through what he did, and discrimination makes him ponder how difficult it is to have a heart. Ultimately Democrat-leaning, but I fear that MAGA would eat him alive. They thrive off fear, and that's how they get everyone to join them. MAGA tried to act all tough and special only to be a pathetic little man. He was gonna take Dorothy home on a freaking hot air balloon, and when it took off without her, he was all, oh, I can't come back, I don't know how it works, goodbye folks, and then all the maggots beneath him are all, goodbye. The wizard is beyond useless, very much MAGA. MAGA manipulated Dorothy knowing how vulnerable she was into doing Glinda's own dirty work just so she could feel important. She also gaslit Dorothy into thinking that she wouldn't have believed Glinda if she had told her in the beginning of the movie that she always had the power to go back to Kansas. Oh, and when the witch shows up, Glinda's just all, oh yeah, she's far worse than the other one, all pleasantly. I also think Glinda was boinking the wizard, thinking he was only gonna screw over the less fortunate and give her this lavish life, only to have a nasty awakening. Democrat, she was a minority who was screwed over by the system, and she's pissed. I could see her running her own campaign, but her rage would send all the civilians of Oz into a shock. Even if she won, she probably wouldn't make things that much better, kinda like a Hillary type. Democrat, she didn't like the way the law worked in her town, and she was not afraid to stand up for the people she loved. She's religious, but she would say Jesus loves everyone, including the gays and our foreign neighbors. Also a Democrat, he didn't say much, but when he did, he had his own subtle ways of saying piss off. Just the way he was toying with Miss Gulch's words, knowing exactly what he was talking about, he just kept trolling her and then slammed the gate on her ass. He hates anyone who messes with his family. MAGA, I think the Munchkins in general are MAGA. They tell Dorothy to see the wonderful Wizard of Oz. They respect Glinda, and they find the only woman who's a minority to be terrifying. Democrat, since he is the witch's lackey. But he's more the type who would say, yeah, we have a problem in this society. Someone must do something about it. I'm gonna make a social media post to tell the people to spread awareness about it. Ultimately left-leaning, but the trees hate the entire political system. They know that Oz is a giant pothole of bullshit that no one is doing anything to fix. They just want to live in harmony with their apples. The wizard can't help them, the witch can't help them. They know they gotta work together to make shit happen. Republican, but not MAGA. He does, after all, work for the wizard's headquarters. But he doesn't actually support what he's doing. I think that when the wizard took off in the hot air balloon, this guy was like, I'm out of here. Neither. He worked for the witch, but he hated that job. I mean, when the Winkies were throwing those spears at Toto, they were doing it with no enthusiasm. They just march and say the same 3 syllables. He wasn't glad the witch got water because he disagreed with her political stance. He was just glad that he could focus on something he really wanted to do, like become an actor or something. Democrat, why else would the Munchkins be celebrating her death? She's probably the reason why the Munchkins even had the freedom to sing about how happy they were that she was gone. The civilians just couldn't handle a woman being in charge. Are these fairy tale characters Democrat or MAGA? MAGA. He put himself on display without any clothes, and the public went along with it because they didn't want to look like fools. They just did what everyone else was doing. This story is basically MAGA in a nutshell. The bears are Democrats, but Goldilocks is MAGA. She had no boundaries, she stole necessities, and she had no idea what consent was. She was rightfully attacked by those bears. She probably scurried out of the house thinking she was the victim. MAGA throws a fit over every little thing. And when something serious does happen, it's too late for him and for everyone else. He only had himself to blame. Democrats, they were poor children struggling to get by. They had each other and used their like-minded skills to escape their wretched childhood and find their happily ever after. Good for them. Democrat, also a poor child who had to rely on himself. And the giant was literally a tyrannical figure who was rich and demanded more. This story is so prevalent for today. Democrat, she was on her way to bring food for her sick grandmother. She could have just said, oh, well, grandmother just needs to pick herself up by the bootstraps. But she didn't. She knows how important it is to help the less fortunate. I have a hunch, though, that the grandmother might be MAGA, but that's an entirely different fairy tale. Republican, but not MAGA. He used deceit to impress a king to feel important. And while he ultimately gave his owner a better life, he did this through deception. He's definitely power hungry, but I doubt his owner is gonna hate the prince life. Moderate. Spent her entire life sheltered, so she doesn't have enough knowledge on what goes on outside of her castle. Once she's escaped, though, it's left a mystery on what side she would choose. Yes, she was kidnapped, but I think marrying the prince might give her more of a privileged mentality. MAGA. He discovered a woman who needed help and basically told her, I'll do this favor for you if you give me your baby when everything works out. If she didn't spin that straw into gold, she could have been thrown into a dungeon, and he didn't even try to help her escape. She was desperate, and he saw her as nothing more than a transaction, entitled as hell. Neither, but would ultimately vote Democrat. They realize no one is coming to save them, so they work together to accomplish their goals. And when they make that happen, it all works out for them. They know the politicians aren't really here for us. It's up to the civilians. The first two pigs would be MAGA, but the third one is a Democrat. The first two pigs are looking for a quick fix, but the third one knows that it will take time to make shit happen. I mean, MAGA voted for Trump sincerely believing he was gonna lower our grocery and gas prices. Trump said he would fix that in a day, and his supporters believed that. She escaped a forced marriage by taking matters into her own hands. She showed how important it is to remain brave, even when you're feeling powerless. She was little, but she was fierce, total leftist, and fighting the good fight. He lived his entire life as a minority, eventually discovering his own beauty and community. Total Democrat, and the biggest star at Pride. MAGA. He said the sky was falling when a freaking acorn touched him. He represents every MAGA supporter who freaks out when they see children laughing and having a great time during drag time story hour. Or when they see a green M&M. MAGA. He was born into royalty, and when he was cursed as a frog, he could have realized how hard others have it. Instead of showing empathy, he manipulated a princess when she needed a favor. He could have just done this out of kindness, but he basically told her, if I do this for you, what's in it for me? Life as a frog could not make him a better prince. Are these characters from Willy Wonka Democrat or MAGA? Democrat. Grew up poor, would be for minorities and for those who need help the most. Although after he gets Wonka's factory in the end, I fear that he might get the mindset of anyone can be a success if they just work hard enough, despite getting the factory out of pure luck. I can only hope he didn't grow up to be a Mark Zuckerberg type. I'm sorry to say it, but Willy Wonka is so MAGA. He's rich, probably a billionaire, very much about being a strong businessman, pro-capitalism. He gives very Jeff Bezos vibes. He also took advantage of a bunch of children and did God knows what to their parents if it made him more sociopathic. Democrat, he was poor and was in frail health. And I think he would be begging Charlie to donate to him if it meant him getting affordable health care. She's from England, so probably not up to date with the politics of America, but if she was, she'd be totally MAGA. Rich, entitled, thinks everything should be handed to her, and is willing to make everyone else suffer if it makes her day just a little better. Just a bitter little see you next Tuesday who's like every maggot who will never be happy. MAGA. He has so much money and it still didn't make him happy. He was miserable at the factory. He had the audacity to ask Wonka if the boat would float. He was also easy to take advantage of by his own daughter. You can imagine how MAGA could do it. He'd be wearing that red hat, even if he didn't live in America. Democrat. She'd be for universal health care and for the working class, but she wouldn't be very progressive beyond that. She would admire the Democrats for their control and power, not because they're gonna help American citizens. And Violet was all about being the best, and she knows MAGA is not that. He's a politician, and while it's never specified which party he's in, I think he'd be Democrat. He had a small business as a used car salesman, and he be for the citizens to live accommodating lives for themselves instead of just backing those who think exactly like him. Ultimately, though, doesn't care that much about change, just wants to better himself like most politicians in power. MAGA, typical bully who would use racial and homophobic slurs just to feel important. Thinks Andrew Tate is the shit and spends his adult years using the TV for Fox News. Doesn't vote, she just lives with a MAGA husband and son pretending that she's happy. She's mastered the art of smiling through Thanksgiving dinner. He's from Germany, but he would be MAGA. He's so entitled he fell into a chocolate river and got sucked into a tube. And he would blame it on immigrants without picking up on the irony. MAGA, all about privilege and had to blame someone else for her own bad parenting. She's MAGA, thinking she's somehow one of the lucky ones. Works for Willy Wonka, so he might label himself as MAGA, but he's secretly a Democrat. He notices all the scandal, the greed, and the debacles in the factory, and he'll use his own techniques to bring the left side up. Democrat, caring mother who wanted to give her son a good life without using rich extravagance. And she was authentic with Charlie about the statistics of winning a golden ticket. Not because she wanted to discourage him, but because she didn't want him to bet on blind luck. After all, happiness comes from within. A variety of everything, but ultimately they despise the political climate. They just want to go to work without all this controversy being thrown at them. The Oompa Loompas are a group of anarchists. Democrat. He warned Charlie not to go to that billionaire factory as it's not a safe place for children. As there was a 100% guarantee that everyone who sets in that factory would disappear. He might have said all of this in a creepy way, but hey, at least he doesn't have to say he didn't warn him. Are these DreamWorks characters Democrat or MAGA? She supports music and art for the youth. Democrat. Moderate. Sees issues on both sides and is very much the every man for himself type. She worked with individuals who were different from her to create a better world, and she left her fiancé who was definitely MAGA. She's Democrat. He thought his own kind would lose their importance if he allowed other creatures to exist. MAGA. Power hungry, takes over a city, and wannabe dictator. MAGA. Big advocator for change. Democrat. Moderate at first. He was raised in a prison and used his skills for public service. Then he took over a city and messed it up for selfish reasons. Once he realized the error of his ways, he became Democrat. Advocated for workers' rights. Democrat. Dragon whisperer who protected the vulnerable. Democrat. He's all about protecting the community. Democrat. Republican, not MAGA. He's all about being the top of a social hierarchy. But he learns to accept people who are different from him and learns how to break traditions. Environmentally friendly and vowed to protect his homeland. Democrat. Independent. He's lost faith in the political system. Pretended to be someone else for fame and value, and he created a divide between the fish and the sharks. MAGA. Wanted to be a real boy and not be pulled by his strings anymore. Democrat.